than Professor Ben. So, our brother from the AU, our sister from the African Commission on Human Rights, Human and People's Rights, our director, City Kenya, and our financial supporter, none other than George Kagoro, and others absent in the House, Ford Foundation, Mod Foundation, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to this inaugural activity and event of the Pan-African Conference, organized by a collective of civil society organizations, as making and contributing a brick to countering terrorism in Africa. Can you clap for yourselves? Colleagues, this is a key moment to us to contribute in defining African solutions to African problems. It is a statement that sounds right. It's a statement that sounds appealing, but sometimes we ask ourselves exactly what is the African solution to African problems. When we talk about terrorism, sometimes we so much think about kinetic approaches that instead worsen the situation. But I think we also need, in African solution, to yet consider more preventive approaches that go to the root cause of the problems. Our chief guests, we are happy of the strides you are taking, but I think it's the time again to echo that you associate yourself with some of our pleas as part of the main causes of terrorism in Africa, that the world focuses attention, that Africa is a recruitment ground, Africa is a financing ground. The elements of leadership deficit that Africa needs to address, the elements of failed state that Africa needs to address, the elements of kleptocracy, the elements of glorifying authoritarianism. And I think through this, we shall be addressing the core. We are in this as members of the civil society because we believe that fighting terrorism is a right and a responsibility for all. Gone are the days when it used to be left to the uniformed officers. And in this, I welcome all of us to find a solution, to make a contribution for a peaceful Africa. Thank you and have a good time. Key to it, before you leave, you must have at least over 10 friends that you should network with in this particular event. It's one thing to collaborate, but it's key to network. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hussein. Our chief guest, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, UN Special Rapporteur, Professor Ben Sol, our sister from the NCTC, Dr. Rosalind Nyawira, our sister from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights on her way, Rosalind Doreen, Dr. Litha Musimi Ogana, Commissioner, African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights, our brother Christopher Kayoshe from the African Union, our sponsor, Brother George Kigoro from Open Society Foundation, our partners, Civic Advisory Hub, Space for Change and Voice of Community Activists and Leaders of Africa, human rights defenders across the African continent present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and privilege to welcome you all to this important conference, whose objectives, if met, will be a milestone in our quest for peace, stability, and sustainable development in our continent. Africa is grappling with insecurity and armed conflicts, presenting a grim picture of a continent without hope of attaining peace, stability, and meaningful development. A number of countries struggle to maintain a modicum of peace and stability years after colonialism. We mourn for countries like Sudan, Libya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, to name but a few countries that have the potential of being economic giants of the continent, but are retrogressing due to lack of peace and stability in their countries. In the West, failed democracies are being violently replaced by military administrations with the support of the people, depicting a grave loss of trust by citizens of their governments. An analysis of the situation will inform us all that the root cause of this endemic state of hopelessness is failure to uphold human rights. For instance, failure to recognize national diversity and to promote inclusiveness, equality of status, and equity in our operations has led to discrimination in development plans and implementation. Marginalization of communities and minorities in development breeds desperation and a call for emancipation. These metamorphosize to armed conflicts, depriving states of peace and harmony. We should recall our conviction as espoused in the preamble to our African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights, when we reminded ourselves that it is henceforth essential to pay a particular attention to the right to development, and that civil and political rights cannot be dissociated from economic, social, and cultural rights in their conception as well as universality, and that the satisfaction of economic, social, and cultural rights is a guarantee for the enjoyment of civil and political rights. It is time that we pay a serious attention to economic and social rights of our people, lest we breed resentment, desperation, and anxiety, which are flammable ingredients for conflicts. It is Haki Africa's hope, as well as our partners, and expectation that this conference shall be a catalyst to build a Pan-African movement of human rights defenders who shall engage their respective states in upholding human rights and lead their citizenry in taking their government to account. May the Lord bless this conference. May the Lord bless Africa. Viva, comrades, viva.
Viva.
Viva, comrades, viva.
Viva.
Viva Africa.
Viva Africa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Echoing the sentiments of Dr. Nyawira on socio-economic rights, and also the sentiments of Yona that we need a Pan-African network, and hopefully moving forward from this conference, then we'll be able to get that. My sister from Spaces for Change, let us hear also from you. She's representing our very good friend, Madam Victoria Ibezimo Hairi, and thank you for partnering with us on this. Karibu.
Your Excellency, retired Honorable Raila, the UN Special Rapporteur, Professor Bensol, and other distinguished members of the High Table, and distinguished colleagues as well. Good morning once again. My name is Shola Sam Adeniyi, and I am in Nigeria. I work to support the direction of civic space programs at Spaces for Change. And this morning I am giving this speech on behalf of Victoria Ibezimo Hairi, who is the Executive Director of Spaces for Change and who is unavoidably absent. I would like to welcome everyone to this exotic meeting where we are going to be having meaningful conversations that will shape the future of Africa in the fight against terrorism. Spaces for Change's central message in the fight to counter terrorism is that counter-terrorism measures deployed by state actors should not close the civic space. Human rights and national security are interdependent and mutually reinforcing objectives. In other words, human rights must lie at the center of efforts to preserve the security of African states in line with the Common African Defense and Security Policy and within the spirit of finding African security solutions. Counterterrorism efforts in Africa have intensified, particularly in the sub-region, following the increase in terrorism-related deaths. Evidence has shown that sub-Saharan Africa recorded the largest increase in terrorism deaths, rising by 8% in 2022 compared to the 2021 death rate. This is by the Global Terrorism Index. The African Union have also acknowledged that the resurgence of unconstitutional change of government, the expanding threats of terrorism and violent extremism across the continent, including the influx of foreign terrorist fighters, private military companies and mercenaries, the proliferation of armed groups as well as transnational organized crimes, negatively impact the peace, security, stability, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of some member states. The countermeasures adopted by countries, though well-intended, have produced certain negative consequences, adversely impacting human rights of civilian populations while constraining the civic space across the continent. It is therefore our duty as civil society organizations to continue to work for the protection of the civic space by ensuring the application of homegrown measures applicable to Africans in Africa. We must secure access and engagement with government, regional bodies, and other actors in the civic space, and also invest in capacity building, research, and knowledge building. When we are effectively armed with these tools, we will be able to defend, promote, and protect human rights and shape the Africa that we want and that works for Africans. It is our hope at Spaces for Change, as co-organizers of this conference, that we will achieve our objectives of reviewing the counter-terrorism measures of African states, evaluate the effectiveness of these measures, and to formulate measures that suits Africans in the protection of human rights in Africa. We also hope that you will have a good time in this conference and also in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And just to add a little, Spaces for Change has this research work that I would want to encourage everyone to grab a copy of it. I have displayed it at the exhibition stand. It's a very good research report that is also going to help, formulate ideas for this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please grab a copy, as have brought some of their publications. Very briefly, Rosette, so that we can then welcome Professor Ben Saul, and then to the Right Honorable former Prime Minister. Very briefly, please.
Thank you very much, Hussein. His Excellency, former Prime Minister, Hon Raila Amollo Odinga, the UN Special Rapporteur, Professor Ben Saul, the Commissioner, African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Dr. Lorin, and Director, National Counterterrorism Center, Rosalind Nyawira, our sponsor, Open Society, George Kagora, and most definitely AU representative, Christopher Kayoshe. I want to say thank you very much for gracing us, and good morning to everyone in this conference. My name is Rosette Ocho. I believe the former directors from each organization has basically said everything. So I had a well-written speech, but noting that I've been told to be as brief as possible, I'll just want to touch on one very important thing as we deal with counterterrorism. As a youth of Africa, as a youth from Kenya, I believe that we are abused. Most of the time, terrorists use us. They use us, they abuse the social media platforms that we normally use, And as a youth, today I want to say that we need to have our voices counted. As a youth in in Kenya, as a youth from Africa, please don't sit down and watch. We are the leaders of today, and we are the leaders of tomorrow. So as we have this conference today and tomorrow, kindly, the youth in this room, let's try and participate. Terrorism requires a multifaceted approach. And as youth, if your voices are not heard, they will not know whatever is troubling us. As we can see, we have people from different organizations. We have government here, we have the African Union, and we also have civil society. So indeed, terrorism requires a multifaceted approach. So if we take this approach and if we give our ideas as we tackle terrorism and how to handle it together with human rights, I believe as Africa we will go far. And as our motto in Vocal Africa, we need to have one Africa, one voice. I think with that, without much further ado, I'll just say thank you and karibuni Kenya. Asanteni sana.
We've had a slight change of the program.